So I've had kind of a weird experience over the last few days where, so on the one hand, I've been procrastinating on editing a video by finally getting around to just like binging through all of Better Call Saul up to like halfway through season 6. Please don't spoil the end of season 6. I mean, I'll probably be finished watching it by the time this video actually comes out. It really depends on how much I procrastinate on this video. And at the same time, the Skyler White video that brought out in like, I think 2019, suddenly got like 1 million times more views. Actually, way more views than the actual new video that I just brought out after like 2 years. It's funny world. You should really watch that new video. So those two things both kind of had me thinking and reflecting a little bit, and I figured this would be a good opportunity for me to just sort of go through criticisms that I've received over the years and how I feel about the criticism and the video itself and those sorts of things now that I'm active on the channel again. So I would generally categorize the criticism I got for the Skyler White video into 3 camps. I think that there's one camp that just sort of came away still feeling like Walt was fairly justified for a lot of the things he did in Breaking Bad, and that Skyler just was still fairly in the wrong, which I just disagree with. There's another camp that sort of just disliked the video because they felt like it was just awkward and preachy, which I completely agree with. And then there was this third camp, and the third camp's perspective was basically that they didn't disagree that Skyler was like in the right in a way, but that I was downplaying how much the show was clearly written in a way to where you're sort of meant to be against Skyler. That I was downplaying that, and then as a result I was kind of demonizing people of having like these really misogynistic attitudes when they're kind of just following where a show is leading them to go. And the thing is, I'm not sure if I went over this in the video, but the first time I went through Breaking Bad, I did feel fairly similarly. You know, I did get to maybe the end of season 3 before I really started to just sort of feel sorry for Skyler. I think oddly enough it was the I fucked Ted part when I really started to feel for her, because it was like I understood what had led her to making those decisions, and then to see her get like vilified for it is actually something that I just felt bad about. Which is interesting because the I fucked Ted moment is what most fans will point out to as clearly the instance where they're like, fuck Skyler, Skyler sucks. So yeah, if anyone does sort of feel like they're in that position where they just feel like the video was kind of demonizing them just because they were sort of misled in the way that the show was kind of written for, yeah, I feel bad about that, and I wouldn't have said things. I would have tried. You know, I think you are always going to get a certain contingent of fans who just kind of look at Skyler and project every negative quality of any woman that they've ever met in their lives, and it's like, that definitely exists, and that's probably the same contingent of the fan base who now also like hates Kim, right? Which is not a substantial part of the audience at all. I think most people like Kim Wexler in Better Call Saul, where they dislike Skyler. And that to me indicates that there is something a little bit deeper going on that maybe I should have done a better job explaining in the video. So here's basically my position on it now. So I think the easiest way to explain the kind of moral world that an adult inhabits is basically to consider that there's always going to be these things you feel like you want to do, and then there's going to be this sort of idea of what you think society believes you should do. And that's often going to get wrapped up in like law and things like that. And there's always going to be this kind of dichotomy between the two of them. And it's sort of unavoidable. You know, humans are social animals. If you want to take part in any kind of community, there's certain rules that you have to follow, and then a lot of those rules end up being kind of implicit. And that's kind of just a dynamic that you kind of just go through in society. And I think Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul are definitely shows that kind of meddle with that sketchy area. Both being shows about men who engage in what seems to be societally incorrect behaviors, but that when you really examine them, you can see the justifications that they have for a lot of the things that they do, or at least understanding for why they end up making the decisions that they do. So when you start from that, you have a character like Skyler White, who obviously in the case of Breaking Bad exists as a representative of the society's correct behaviors, right? Especially in the first season when she's like freaking out about the weed shit. You get this really strong sense that she's like this busybody, right? That she is this kind of moral watchdog. And I think immediately you kind of end up siding with Walt, because I think we all do kind of have this feeling that, you know, there's sometimes going to rub up against this thing of like, well, I want, and then what other people are telling me is the right thing, you know, and that could be frustrating. And so the idea of just being like, fuck that, is very liberating. I think that that's kind of the element of wish fulfillment, is the idea of someone that can just fully reject all of the shit that they feel like society's telling them to do. So when Skyler comes up, they're basically like representing the panopticon, right? The sort of thing watching over you and making sure you know when you're doing not the right thing, you're doing something that you've been told is wrong, like smoking weed because you're fucking dying. You can definitely identify with Walt, this sort of feeling that, you know, you're doing all of the correct things that you've been told you should do, and it's just leading you into this sort of miserable, empty life. I think that the hand job, which is what many people cite as the first thing that made them dislike Skyler, represents that metaphorically really well. This empty gesture, right? This just sort of emptiness. I think from that moment, a lot of people are just like, "Yep, I'm on Team Wall. That sad hand job. That's me." But at the same time, I really do think that the show is trying to lead you in this direction so that it can take the next step, which is sort of necessary, which is to understand not just that those feelings exist and that they come from somewhere fairly justified, but that you can't just sort of leave those feelings there. Because if you do, you're often going to end up just sort of acting out against the society that you're disillusioned with in a way that only really hurts the people in your immediate vicinity and doesn't actually do anything at all to the society that you're surrounded by, that you're so unhappy with. Like, you know, notice how the main people that still love Walt and like idolize him are like anarcho-capitalists, right? Libertarian type people who are doing exactly the same thing, where they're like, fuck society, we're gonna go our own way, and then just do something that doesn't really change society in any meaningful way. It's literally just playing the same fucking game, just with this sort of false feeling of like validation, like you're above other people or whatever. You know, those are the kinds of people that still love Walt to this day, because I think that's the lesson that the show's trying to sort of teach you. And if you don't learn that lesson, I guess that's what you'll come away with. Yeah, I think that misogyny element is definitely there for a lot of the reasons that I went into in the video. But I definitely agree that in retrospect, there is this strong kind of dynamic in which Skyler represents more generally how society shames people for trying to just sort of free themselves from this sense of like, oh, I'm doing what's lawfully correct even though I know it is of no benefit to me and not really to the people around me. And I think it leads to the relevant issue that sort of jumps out at me with Breaking Bad now, is specifically the use of crime as a metaphor for this kind of descent into the worst version of yourself. I think Walt has this profound experience that you could probably call something like a religious experience, where it's kind of like he completely rejects every lesson that society's taught him and just sort of feels this strong sense of this, you know, new will, right? This new persona he wants to adopt, this new life that he wants to build that no one's told him to do. He has just, it's like an epiphany that he's come to. And then you kind of learn over time that, oh, a lot of this is more built on these feelings of envy and pride and greed. And I think where that creates a bit of an issue is that when you do have this story that's sort of about this ground between like law and order, you know, what is right or wrong morally or legally or whatever. I don't think it's as simple as more crime equals more bad, less crime equals more good. I think characters like Mike generally illustrate this to some extent, where you're clearly supposed to sympathize with Mike a lot, and I think sort of understand that he's not coming at this from the position of like, oh, I'm in the criminal world because I don't give a fuck about any kind of sense of right or wrong. You know, it's more that he's a very pragmatic person who's had a lot of negative experiences with the lawful society.
That wasn't dirty. I was. Everyone was in that precinct. That's how it worked. You turn in your buddy, you're screwing yourself. You go along to get along.
And sort of has ended up in this unusual moral territory that I think a lot of people can relate to in the real world. But for the most part, that is still how the show generally treats criminality. It's this idea that criminal behaviors are like these indulgences we do into like our darker, you know, shadow selves or whatever. I think the reason that I bring up Better Call Saul as kind of a better example of this is that I really think in the way that Better Call Saul deals specifically with the legal system, it really highlights a lot of the ways that the law as it currently exists is often cruel and it is often arbitrary, and it does often punish people for things that either they had no control over or from a much more complicated kind of set of things than just, oh, they decided to indulge in this bad behavior.
You made a mistake, and they are never forgetting it. As far as they're concerned, your mistake is just, that's who you are.
Listen, it doesn't matter. It doesn't, because you don't need them.
I mean, they're not going to give it to you?
So what? You're going to take it.
Walt is that, right? Walt is an example of somebody that does treat crime as this indulgence. Early on, we do get this impression that Walt is doing what he's doing out of a genuine sense of need, and I think that's when people feel like a lot of empathy for him, up until the part where he's literally just offered the money for his treatment, which, to be clear, is an unusual thing to happen. And I think the reason that that was done so early in the show is to separate Walt from the experiences that would probably make him much more easily understandable to a large number of people. If Walt never had that offer of money, which most people don't, I think there would be a much stronger sense throughout the show that a lot of the behaviors he's talking about, or I think there would be a much stronger sense over the course of the show that you can justify a lot more of the behaviors that he ends up engaging with. Mainly because there just wouldn't be this opportunity to really make it clear that, like, no, Walt is not like most people. He's not just someone that needs the money. There is kind of this deeper thing going on here that does relate to this, like, pride that he feels. And what I like Better Call Saul is that it does show that there's so much more going on when it comes to this idea of committing a crime and doing wrong. You know, I think this is why people come away with so much more positive things to say about Kim than someone like Skyler, right? Because Kim is somebody who, you know, grew up struggling and who does understand that there are these difficult positions that you'll sometimes just be put in. I have like childhood memories of me and my mum just not having the change for like parking meters and needing to go to places and like pick stuff up, and I would have to kind of watch out for if there was like a parking warden or something around. It's just those little things that pop up, I think, over the course of tons of people's lives. We sort of realize you're doing something that's kind of wrong, but that is also just what needs to be done in that moment. So I'm a US citizen now. I was naturalized a couple of weeks ago. And when I was first applying for my green card, I got an immigration lawyer because I was having an issue where I had a visitor visa to come to the US because I hadn't planned to stay permanently when I came to visit. And then I decided I did want to stay permanently, but you can't apply for a green card when you already have a visitor visa. Under advisement, I was told to just wait for the visa to expire, then right afterwards make the application for the green card, because once the application was made, I would legally have a secured place in the country while the application was being dealt with. There was that span of a day or two where there wasn't an application that had been fully submitted, but also I didn't have a valid visa. This was something that I did because an immigration lawyer told me it was what I was supposed to do. I went online and that's what everyone was telling me I was supposed to do. And it just felt so strange. But we're constantly dealing with difficult moral issues like that, where it's like, am I even doing something wrong here, even though it's legally not what I'm supposed to be doing? I like Better Call Saul because I do think it deals more in that moral landscape that we do really deal with in life. But I think as a specific story about the idea that we can push away from society and become disillusioned by society, and then end up acting out in ways that only end up harming the people around us. I do think Breaking Bad is a very strong story for that kind of message. So I guess that's kind of my thoughts on it. I do understand that a fair chunk of the people that criticized the original video didn't really watch it, and probably won't watch this either. But a lot of people did give good faith feedback, and I hope this kind of clarifies where my take on it currently is. I'm sure some people think it would have been better if I had specifically gone through the old video and like point by point relitigated it, but I think the idea of watching a video of myself from years ago it kind of makes me feel like those coffins that are just filled with spikes, so when you close them... I've been procrastinating with a lot of Darkest Dungeons recently.
The walls close in. The shadows whisper of conspiracy.
But yeah, no, really, you should watch that new video. You should watch that new video I have. Like the video, subscribe to the video, become a member of the video, YouTube member, because there's actually a preview video out. And then I've also got the Patreon where you can get in the credits that are going now. And I guess I'll see... Oh, and follow me on Twitter, follow me on Twitch. I also have Ko-fi.